Hi guys, and welcome to our Roofless in Colloquium tutorial and presentation. We're super excited to be here and we'll do the presentation right away and right now. Hopefully it'll be just like 30 minutes and then after that we kind of talk and share stuff and then give feedback and all that stuff. So we have been changing the format. So now we've always recorded the sessions, but now we're going to record them and put them out because a lot of people are really interested on uh, these things that we talk about. So the the presentation tutorial today is going to be about how to make colors with the three primaries. And can we make all the colors with three primaries? I think we can, and we're just gonna give it a try. But I'll give you a little bit of the genesis of why we're doing this. So you know that we use disposable palette paper, and it's easy to clean, and we like to start fresh with color. So it's something that we've been using for a while and it works for us. So there are different brands of palette paper out there. And so we ran out of one of the studio ones. And then we got this gray one. And also we got the gray one because we wanted to do studies with dark notes. And this was really great for that. So this is one brand, and it has like a gray paper, and you can see that it's a little bit shiny, and that's why it works great for paint. But as we were pulling the papers, we realized that there's something really, really cool behind the first page or the cover. There's a color wheel, and there are a few explanations of what paints to use to create the primary colors. And we were like, what? So what we're gonna do today, we're gonna explain the best primary colors based on this chart. And also we've done some digging on the abyss that is YouTube, and we found that a few artists recommend different greens and blues sometimes and blacks if we were to use only primary colors. So yeah, so I'm gonna go deep into this, but basically they give three options or a few options for the primaries. So this is like a typical color wheel, and we're gonna talk about color theory a little bit. And the primary colors are this right here. So on the yellow, they recommend cadmium yellow light, which is the one that we are gonna use on our palette. And for the red, it's not cadmium red. Actually, a lot of painters that we were looking into, they're not using cadmium red as a primary color. And we were surprised, but we were not really surprised because we've gotten so many great results with other reds. So they recommend number one, alizarin crimson. So we ran out of our Utrecht brand, and we went out and we got a new alizarin crimson tube. And I think this is gonna be a color that's gonna take a lot of protagonism in our palette. They recommend two quinacridones, quinacridone crimson and quinacridone rose. We don't have those. We have a different quinacridone violet, I believe. But we've got the alizarin crimson. So that is the second color, the second primary color on our palette. Cadmium yellow light, alizarin crimson. And in regards of the blues, they recommend two that are not French ultramarine. They are phthalo blue and Prussian blue. So we got them, and then we decided not to go with the Prussian blue because it's already given too much of a spotlight. So we went for phthalo blue on the palette. So I'm gonna switch the screens and then I'll explain what we're gonna do. So this is gonna be the primary palette, and we have a white and quote unquote black. The white is titanium white, but the black is not really black, it's raw umber, because we realized that a lot of painters are not really into bringing Mars black or ivory black when they use very limited colors. They'd rather make black out of two colors, and we'll explain which ones. So yeah, let's get it. Let's get started, and I'm just gonna see if this is working. I think it is working, right? I'm just gonna put it a little closer, and yes. And also, I'm just gonna make sure it doesn't move. So I have these two putty dots because it just moves around a little bit. Okay, here we go. And I need liquids. I'm just gonna use turpentine and a rag. So I'll just put it right here. So the first one, I'm gonna try to create different oranges right here. I'm gonna try to create different greens right here, and we'll see what we can do with purples. We haven't done this before, so this will be an experiment. So when we mix colors, we always say that the ratio is very important. So it just depends on how dark and light the color is. You put more of the lighter color, less of the darker color. There's not specific formulas for everything because you have to look at what you're painting and then come up with your own formula. So sometimes what we recommend doing is without having any idea of how to create a color. Let's start by bringing the three colors together in the middle. So this is cadmium yellow light. There are three kinds of cadmium yellow, light, medium, and I forgot the other one, deep, yeah. So a little bit of this. I'm gonna bring less of the alizarin crimson to just create a mixture, maybe a little bit more of this, and a little bit of the phthalo blue. So this is good because by doing this, I know which of the colors takes over the most. This being the darkest, and also it's a chemical-based color. So I know that this is taking a lot of, yeah, it's taking over the mixture. So the idea is that when you mix like three of the primaries, you get sort of like a brownish color. So what's important, it's not so much how you mix the colors, but how to drag or pull back colors once you have or you read a certain shade or a certain hue. So that's what's really important because starting with a base, it's fairly easy, and we recommend sort of like to pull from different tones. But once you have the base and you need to fine tune that base, then you need to read what kind of like cast the color has. And based on that, you can always use colors that are opposite in the color wheel in order to pull it back. So for example, I think we're not ready yet for this, but this looks very much green. So if it reads green on the palette, so I know that I have to use a warm opposite color to where the green would be in order to counterbalance it. So that's what's really important when mixing colors. Not so much the formula, but how to be able to move or drag that color into a warmer or a cooler cast. So here we go. I think this reads pretty brown. So that could be, yeah, a good way to start our mixing. So, and it's also a good way, last week we did skin tones. So if you had to make skin tones without any of the fancy colors we had last week, you could just bring the three primaries together and then create a brownish tan or skin tone. And then you can always warm it up, make it lighter with titanium white or darker with raw umber. So I'm gonna start with the greens actually. And I'll just use a little bit of the yellow. and some of the phthalo blue, and see what kind of green we get. And yeah, this is a reason and a good example. We haven't done this before. This is the first time we're doing it, but with the phthalo blue. But this is the reason why we felt phthalo blue, we understood why phthalo blue could be a better color to have as primary rather than French ultramarine. It's super strong, it's much bluer, it's not as dark. So when you mix it with green, with yellow, you can get something pretty brilliant green. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create mixtures of this green by adding bits of more yellow to it in order to give you different shades of that green. So you know that you can just combine these two and create different tones of green that are more towards the yellow cast. And what I'll do now, it's just kind of like bring that brilliant green and with some blue. And I have to be careful because this is a very powerful color. And bring some of this right here. It's super strong, very saturated. And yeah, it could be not a very good idea to use such bright color. The reason is because colors usually on naturalistic things are a little bit more balanced or not as saturated. So if I wanted to create colors that are a little bit less saturated than this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of how to counterbalance colors. Because what I'll do is just bring a little bit of the opposite color, which is the alizarin crimson. And I'm going to try to create versions of the greens that are a little bit, they're still green, but a little bit less saturated. So this is a color that it could be a little bit more realistic to add on a painting if we try to match colors. So they're getting very dark because alizarin crimson is a dark color. So let's kind of like reveal what kind of greens we can get by adding some titanium white to the ones that we did with a slight amount of alizarin crimson. So these are like gorgeous, tempered, nice, beautiful greens that we could use by doing a combination of two primaries and pulling back the pigmentation or the hue with the opposite color. I'll do the same thing with a tad of alizarin crimson on the other side. These are beautiful colors for foliage, for example, the ones that I'm doing right now. So yeah, I think that's good. And then some titanium white to create a tint and reveal what kind of shade those colors have. So by just using two primaries and using the remaining primary as a counterbalancing the color, you can create a rich, white, beautiful, dynamic, broad range of greens. So the reason why people use the raw umber or any kind of like dark brown in order to darken colors, it's because if you mix this raw umber with any kind of blue, it will give you a really, really rich black. So most professional painters, rather than using pure black, they rather resource or outsource the function of black to mixing two opposite temperature colors. And if both of those are dark, then it's easier to create the darker shade. So can you just, let's see if we can just bring a little bit of the tone on the other side of the range we did to see the shades of that green that we can create. Those colors for me are much more interesting than the raw ones. So we can create darker versions of the first colors we did by using a little bit of the raw umber with a little bit of the blue. It's a very neutral tone, and that gives you another interesting range of dark greens that goes from the ones that are lighter with the addition of yellow and the ones that are darker with more blue on them. So yeah, I'm just gonna move to the next one. This is gonna be hard, so I'm gonna move to the next one, the purples. I'm sorry, the orange ones. The orange ones. And I'll do the same thing. I think I'm just gonna move this a little bit further to the corner. I'll try to create something in between using just the cadmium yellow light and alizarin crimson. And again, the purpose of this um, paint alchemy tutorial presentation is just give you a demonstration on how you don't have to have like 8, 9, 15 colors on the palette. You could easily create all the colors based on only 3 and a couple of neutral ones to lighten and darken. And also very important is how to practice once you have a color mix, how to move the needle of that color mix towards a place in which you can control the value and also the temperature, which is really what color mixing is about. Color mixing is not about memorizing formulas, but just having a sense that you could create something that's very basic and you can always move that needle from that base that you created by adding very small portions or pigments from opposite colors in the color wheel. So I'm gonna do the same thing right here with some of the yellow and some of the alizarin crimson. And I should probably have cleaned my brush a little bit more or used a different brush because this is not super pigmented, but that's okay. Anyhow, so this could be a base, a color base of those two mixed together. Yeah, a color base, I would say so. You can always bring cadmium orange, you could argue, because you would never get the bright orange mixing pigments that don't have orange as a focus. That could be a good argument, except for the fact that any color that comes out of the tube, in our opinion, needs to be what I call tempered or desaturated. So it's kind of like counterintuitive to bring a super bright orange right off the bat when you know that when you squeeze it on the palette, you will have to temper it with some color, some neutrals in order to create a more balanced version. So why not start with 2 primaries, you could argue, and then create an orange that is not as bright. So you already have it much closer to whatever thing orange you want to paint. So I already need to bring more yellow. So let me just squeeze a little bit more. And I'm glad I just put the putty on the surface. And then what I'll do, I'll just bring a little bit more yellow on top of what I have. I'll do just a few. To give you an idea of, maybe this one could have a little bit more quinacridone. Give you an idea of how you could just create something on the range of a balanced yellow towards the balanced orange towards the yellow. I'll do the same with the other side. I just added more yellow here, and that means that I need to add a little bit more of the alizarin crimson. Yeah, I love this color so much. Yeah, that could be a good range. This still has a little bit of yellow in it. So that as a first or as a starter, this could be just a simple base to visually explain the range between yellow and a red. In this case, the cadmium yellow light and the alizarin crimson. Is this the palette or the color that I would use straight away or straight up on a painting straight up? Most likely, no. 99% of the time, I would have to either pull back, create a pull back, meaning sort of like desaturate a little bit or create a tint or a shade. So just because you can mix these colors and that's the first color you have, it doesn't mean that you are going to apply them on the painting. Most likely it needs another process, a couple more processes actually. Not the first, it's not the first color that you mix, the one that you're gonna end up using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can pull back this warmth by using the opposite color on our color wheel. So a little bit of that blue, if you bring it, it's just a little bit with meaning enough to desaturate the orange without turning it too blue. Because it's so dark and so cold, if you put too much of the blue, then this color would be a blue version, a warm blue version. So we want to make sure that when we drag the color from its brilliance into something a little bit more desaturated, we use an opposite tone, but with very with a lot of care. Let's put it this way. So I'm just bringing a little bit of blue on the tones that I had right here. This, for example, has already too much of the blue. So I'm just going to bring some of the yellow to counterbalance it. So it still reads, now it reads orange, but it's not as bright as the first or initial orange. So that's another good example of how to balance, desaturate, remove pigmentation from a mix that you may have, that it's completely impractical if you want to add it to something realistic. And then I'll just use a little bit of that blue right here, which naturally it starts to read greenish. And then finally, this is probably a better version. Maybe I'll need a tad of the quinacridone. So if you notice what I'm doing is, once I have a mix, and this is another example, a good example of what I mean by moving the needle. It's a good example of how once I have the mix, I can use small portions of opposite colors in order to move the needle from too green to something that feels a little bit more rusty. Anyhow, so yeah, that's a little bit better than what it was before. Maybe value-wise, these are too similar, so I would probably have to bring some yellow here in order to create a scale that goes from darker to lighter. So yeah, let me just do the same thing from or using the opposite one. So a little bit of the quinacridone, phthalo blue, and then just bringing the phthalo blue yeah, that's it, a little bit more rusty. There you go. So yeah, I think that's pretty intense, but it's okay. It still has a little bit of like yellow. So I'm not unhappy with the range or the scale that we created, and the one we did next to it to show that we can pull back the brilliance of the color using the opposite tone. So on the actual color wheel, if we wanted to create an opposite color, instead of like pulling constantly from the blue, we would probably use a green or a purple in order to counterbalance it better. But that's too much work. When you paint, you don't have time to do all this exploration. And all the process, it's kind of like unconscious. What I'm focused on is trying to develop the state that I'm at, and I don't have time to think about color theory. And that's why it's so hard to explain or articulate how colors are mixed when we're painting, because there's so much going on. We can barely keep up with developing details and moving one stage at a time, one stage at a time. So I'll do that. Oops, I forgot to do a little tint. Let me see if I can with some white. This probably has a little bit too much of the red showing, but this could be, yeah, definitely. You know, there's a little bit too much. It's very even with value, and the reason this happened, it's because I barely made any paint with the desaturated version. So the little titanium white that I used completely whited it out, or took over. So I would have to possibly, if I wanted to create variations, maybe just blend it a little bit more like this in between. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that. You know, it's still very much equal in value, but that's okay. This was pretty much equal in value, and what we wanted to do with the tint was to reveal a little bit more the quality of the mixture that we created. So for the purposes of creating a scale, this wasn't that important, but for the purposes of bringing a tint to reveal the color, this is a good example of how that works. So should we bring some black? Let's kind of like do it. So bringing some of the raw umber and a little bit of the blue will create a very neutral, darker note that we can bring to darken our initial mixture. So that could be a good way to bring darker versions of the tone. Again, just like a minimum amounts. When you move that needle, that color needle, you have to be careful about how much paint you add, because a little bit could overwrite your process, your color process. So always minimum amounts. The smallest amount will create an impact on the mixture. So you have to be really careful. And what I'll do is see what happens with this. This is the most problematic, just because both colors are dark. And but it's the reason why the 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 lesson or the guide recommends different reds and different blues that we will use, because if I made a glaze of this, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a much richer purple than with cadmium red and ultramarine. So this will get more revealed when we add white to create tints. But for now, what I'll do is I'll just do less. I'll do just like 3. And then I'll also do like I would say 3, but then counting the one in the middle. So I'll do 2 on this side. Yeah, I think that works. So I'm not gonna have that much space, but what I'll do is I'll bring a little bit of white in order to reveal what kind of like tint we can create from the original mixture. So even though this is not a brilliant purple, again, it could be a good tone to apply realistically. So to things on our painting that are purple-like. Um, so don't go straight to purple paint because once you squeeze it on the palette, you know that you'll have to temper it, balance it, um, pull it back. So sometimes using two colors or two primarily related colors in order to create a secondary color, it's not a bad idea. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of these tones to see. This is a much more interesting purple right here, closer to the alizarin crimson. And then at the same time, I'll just add some of this. So don't look at the scale of temperature, but look at how, or the variation of purples we can get, the more alizarin crimson we may have, or the more phthalo blue we may have on the painting. So I don't think it makes sense to do a shade of these colors just because it's already so dark, but perhaps what we could do is just bring some of the opposite color and see if we can create or pull back those tones. Yeah, I think so. It just kind of like creates a different version, a more tempered, although we put too much yellow right here. I think that would be a good pullback of the purple. So they're still, they read, they should read like purple, but a little bit less intense. And again, moving the color needle, we just have to tweak and adjust in very small amounts how much of the opposite color we want to still create purple, but a little bit more pulled back. I think that's what I wanted to do, but I wanted to show you an example of after doing this, which is interesting in regards of like how to move the needle of color when you make a mixture. But I don't know if I'll be able to do this. I'm gonna try. Um, so I found out an excellent way to test color once you have a photograph. So let me see if I can just bring the image or an image of what we did or the photograph that we used last week. And what I want to do, I want to apply this experimentation or this practice to a real life scenario, which is we have a photograph, we need to make a paint, and we need to match it. And I found out that there's a way of creating color samples in a photograph that doesn't involve actually painting on the photograph. If you notice, there's some color samples that we did when we painted on Friday around the photograph. So someone told me that it's a good idea to get a sheet of plastic. I thought this was brilliant, a brilliant art hack. And have it handy. I just did one that's too big. So you can create the color on your palette and then test it on top of the photograph in order to find out, compare, see if you can do the color or not. And then you can just move it away and do another color sample on top. So I thought I'm gonna give this a try in assignments coming forward because you don't have to have this covering the entire paper, and you can have just a little piece. It could be one of those sheet protectors. You can cut it up or anything that's transparent and doesn't create a lot of wrinkles. So let's say I want to match this cheek color right now, and we'll put this to the test. So what I'll do is I'm going to try to make a flesh tone right here, or practice to make a flesh tone. Is this, yeah. Let me just move this a little bit. Okay, yeah. Oops, sorry. And see how close I can get to the flesh tone of the face. So how do I do it? So I think the first thing that I would do is possibly just bring the primaries together, because I know that in order to create a flesh tone, I need to create something muddy. So why not, knowing that the three primaries will create a muddy note, why not start with that? I don't have to be exact. I don't have to find out the ratio. I only need to create some muddy notes. So I'm just pulling some of the primaries to create something, to create something muddy. So this one right here, it's very much green. So I can read the green. So I'm gonna bring some of the alizarin crimson and see if I can just temper it a little bit. All right, so it's very dark. So I have two options to lighten up a color. I can use the yellow and I can use the white. Most people kind of like resource, or they go to yellow just because they don't want to alter the pigmentation too much. There's a risk because if I put too much yellow, then the color cast is going to change. So I'm going to bring some of the white to create a lighter version. And that alone just gives me a tone that I think could be a first base. So what I need to do once I have this, which I will call the first process, what I do is I just compare it. So I just put it, I'm gonna put it right here. So obviously this is two things. Number one, it's too light. Can you see the contrast? And number two, it's too orange-like. So the first process for me was to do a base. And then after the base, I analyze, comparing the color sample, what I need to adjust. Where do I need to move that needle? It needs to be a little bit darker, and it needs to be a little bit less orange. So if I want to make it darker, I have a couple of options. I could bring any of those darker notes right here, or use the alternative black, the raw umber mixed with a little bit of blue. So why not, before I go there, why not to darken it? I'm gonna give a try and bring some of the blue to make it a little darker. And since now it's kind of like greenish, let me see if I bring a little bit of the red. All right, so very small amount of blue and red made it darker. Did it change the temperature needle? I'm gonna check. So this already, it's a little bit, it's pretty close. What did I do? I didn't think, what did I do? What did I do in order to move that needle? I didn't think in regards of formula or how much to put of this, or now I need to do that. What I thought is the basic color theory, in the sense I need to look at how light or dark it is, and then either make it lighter or make it darker. That's number one. And then number two, how warm and cold it is. So it needed to be a little bit less orange. So I feel like it's still a little bit on the greenish cast. So I'm gonna see if I can just add a little bit of the red to darken it a tad, just a little bit, which I think it needs to be a little bit darker, but then have more of a warmth version. And I think it's a little bit more red. Just gonna move this slightly to the side. That's the advantage of having the sheet. And this is, in my opinion, this is right now absolutely perfect match. Not super perfect, but quite perfect, quite perfect. So I'm pretty sure that if I use this on the face, then I would have, after half an hour, I would see that this, maybe the cast is not quite what I envisioned, and I would probably have to change it. But for me, this was the most important part of this presentation, to show how to apply the color mixing from primaries onto a real example, and how we can create any shade and any color with an extremely limited palette by just moving that needle slightly, using lighter notes, darker ones, creating more warmth, more coolness, very small amounts. It's never one particular formula. Um, and I think that's all. I love this art hack. This is like my new favorite thing right now. So right, so cool. And this concludes, let me just bring this back and bring a little bit of this pretty mess that we made. This concludes our tutorial today. I hope it was helpful, and I can't wait to hear, we can't wait to hear what you guys think. Do you have any other ideas? Do you think like we should incorporate something, change something? We are always looking for other people's input on that. This was very helpful and revealing. We used a different red and a different blue for this assignment. Let me just bring this up, or this presentation. Alizarin crimson and phthalo blue. I think these are two colors that we recommend to have, especially this one. And you can create any color you want with 3 primaries. Why is this good? Maybe sometimes you want to travel and you don't have time or place to pack your paint. So you can just grab a few tubes and then you're done. So thank you, and let us know what you think.